The movie begins with an American military convoy in Afghanistan on a mission. Among the vehicles is millionaire and weapons developer Tony Stark, who is joking with the soldiers. Suddenly, one of the military vehicles explodes as a terrorist group ambushes them. The soldiers defend themselves, but most are killed because they were unprepared. Tony quickly escapes and hides behind a rock, but a missile falls nearby, and he notices that it was produced by his company. The missile explodes next to him, and although he survives due to wearing a protective suit, some shrapnel penetrates his body, causing him to lose consciousness. We flash back 36 hours earlier, when Tony is being honored with an award for his numerous projects in the country. A presentation shows Tony Stark's story and childhood photos, mentioning that he is the son of famous millionaire Howard Stark. Tony is portrayed as a genius who invented things from a young age after his parents died in a car accident, leaving him as the head of Stark Industries. He developed powerful weapons and robots. Later, during an event where he is supposed to receive an award, Tony is absent and instead at a casino with women. A journalist named Christine approaches him for questions about the weapons he produces for the military. He explains that his father helped America defeat Germany in World War II, and that to ensure peace, they must be stronger than their enemies. He also claims to save many children through medical devices produced by his company. This conversation reveals that Tony is very arrogant and sees himself as the most beneficial person for the country. Tony manages to bring Christine back to his house, where they have a sex. The next morning, Christine wakes up to the sound of his AI assistant named Jarvis, who manages everything in Tony's house and lab. As she leaves, she meets Tony's assistant Pepper, who helps him with his work before he heads off to board his plane. Tony meets Colonel James Rhodes, who disapproves of Tony's reckless lifestyle. They go out for drinks before Tony arrives in Afghanistan, where he showcases his latest invention, a new missile called Jericho, that launches multiple missiles autonomously. After the demonstration, he speaks with Stain and informs him that he has provided weapons for the military. When Tony regains consciousness after being captured by terrorists known as the 10 Rings, he finds himself in a cave with a strange device in his chest powered by a car battery. A doctor named Yinsen explains that he removed some shrapnel but couldn't get it all out. Thus, he implanted the device to prevent it from reaching his heart. The terrorists want Tony to build them a new Jericho missile. Tony refuses to help them and is tortured until they nearly drown him. After some time outside the cave, they show him their stockpile of Stark Industries weapons and tell him they have everything needed to build the missile. Realizing he has no other choice, Tony agrees but plans to betray them. He requests specific materials from the terrorists, while secretly planning to create a small reactor similar to the one in his chest that would power an armored suit. With Yinsen's help, Tony successfully builds the reactor and dons it in his chest, just as the terrorists realize he's not building what they wanted. As they monitor him through cameras, Yinsen shares his story about being kidnapped from his village in Afghanistan called Gulmira. He reveals that he once met Tony at a conference while drunk. Eventually, they start working on an armored suit together. One day, their leader Raza enters and tortures Yinsen for information about Tony's progress. Raza gives Tony 1 day to finish building the missile, or else Yinsen will be killed. Working tirelessly under pressure, they complete the suit just in time. When Raza's men come looking for them, Yinsen shows Tony an escape route while Raza senses something is wrong and sends his men after them. They rig explosives at the cave entrance, just as Raza orders everyone to gather. Yinsen sacrifices himself to buy time for Tony as he fights off Raza's men using the suit's weapons. After defeating them all and destroying their weapon stockpile with explosions that damage his suit, but ultimately allow him to escape using its flight capabilities, Tony flies away but crashes in the desert after losing control of the suit due to its overheating systems. He removes it and wanders until 2 American planes fly overhead with Colonel James aboard, who is relieved to find Tony alive after 3 months of captivity. Upon returning home, Pepper insists on treating his injuries immediately. However, Tony insists on holding a press conference instead, where he announces shutting down Stark Industries' weapons division after realizing how his weapons were used for evil purposes. The news shocks everyone, and on the other side, Pepper meets Agent Coulson from the National Security Division, who has come to talk to Tony about his kidnapping. Pepper schedules a meeting with him to discuss with Tony and Stain after the conference. Stain arrives to meet Tony, visibly angry about Tony's decision to shut down the weapons division, stating that this will significantly drop the company's stock prices. However, Tony wants the company to advance in different industries and says, "I don't want to be the reason for people's deaths." He also mentions that he will resist the company regarding reactor technology, but Stain counters that the project is not profitable and that Tony knows this well. Tony shows Stain the reactor in his chest, explaining that it is working very well. Stain seems worried and tells him to relax and leave everything to him. Meanwhile, Pepper sees a news anchor mocking Stark Industries, advising people who have shares in the company to sell them immediately. Tony asks Pepper to come to him because he wants her help in creating a more advanced version of the reactor. Naturally, Pepper reacts strongly when she sees the reactor implanted in his chest. He wants her to reach in and remove the wire inside. He asks her to be careful, but she becomes anxious and scared, making a mistake that could have resulted in Tony suffering a heart attack. However, she manages to handle the situation just in time. Tony then asks her to destroy the old reactor since it is no longer needed. Afterward, he speaks with Colonel James Rhodes and requests his help with his new project. However, James can no longer tolerate Tony after his decision regarding the weapons division closure and suggests that Tony might be suffering from a mental disorder due to the trauma of his kidnapping. Tony returns to his AI assistant Jarvis and discusses his plans for an upgraded Iron Man suit because he wants to create one that is more advanced and stronger than the one he had in the cave. He and Jarvis start working on it, and Jarvis presents a three-dimensional conceptual image of the suit's design. Tony discards unnecessary items as they work. In another scene, we transition to the desert with Raza's men, revealing that Raza has survived, and his men are uncovering remnants of Tony's suit from the sand. Raza seems intent on using this suit for something specific. Meanwhile, Tony decides that the first thing he needs to work on for his new suit is a flight system. He continues working for many days in his lab. One day Pepper comes in and finds him creating a weapon for the suit. He explains that this is not a weapon, but a flight system he will place in the arm to provide balance and assist him in flying. Tony attempts to fly with it, resulting in a somewhat successful test. Later, Pepper leaves a gift on his desk. Shortly after, Stain meets with Tony again and informs him that the company's board of directors has filed a lawsuit against him to take control of the company. However, Tony is not worried about this because he holds a larger share in the company and continues working on his suit. After several failed attempts, Tony finally manages to create a flight system for the suit and completes it entirely. He also connects Jarvis to the suit so they can communicate and alert him if there are any malfunctions or maintenance needs while analyzing and scanning anything around him. Despite Jarvis warning him that the suit is still not safe for use, Tony decides not to listen because he is very excited about flying it. He flies upward into the sky beyond the suit's intended flight limits. Due to low temperatures at high altitudes, ice begins forming on the suit, causing issues with its systems. As a result, Tony falls but manages to save himself by activating an emergency system just before crashing into the ground. Afterward, he returns home but crashes through 3 floors of his house due to how heavy the suit is, damaging one of his expensive cars in the process. As he recovers from these shocks, he opens Pepper's gift, only to find it is another reactor like the one he was wearing. It was wrapped as if it were a present with Pepper's note, stating that this proves Tony has a heart. He then analyzes the suit's performance and decides to make it out of gold titanium alloy so it won't freeze up while asking Jarvis to add red coloring as well. Jarvis gets started on this while Tony attends an event where he meets Agent Coulson again, who wants details about his kidnapping. During this time, Christine approaches him with photos taken yesterday showing terrorists using his weapons against a village in Afghanistan called Gulmira, the same village where Dr. Yinsen was born. This raises questions for Tony about how they obtained those weapons since he had destroyed them before escaping. Christine tells Tony that his company sold weapons to the gang, and it turns out that Stain's right-hand man was the one who sold the weapons to the terrorist organization. He tells Tony that he has no problem selling weapons to all parties, as long as he profits from it. He also reveals that he is one of the board members who filed a lawsuit against Tony. Tony is shocked to discover that one of the people he trusts most has betrayed him in this way. Tony returns home, furious, and watches the news on television, which reports on the terrorist activities in Gulmira, where the villagers are being driven from their homes due to the gang. Meanwhile, Tony is modifying the arm of his suit and successfully integrates a flight system as a weapon. The Iron Man suit is finally complete. He puts it on and flies to Gulmira, determined to correct his company's mistakes and defend the village of the man who sacrificed his life for him. In Gulmira, the terrorists are gathering people to execute them when suddenly their savior appears, Tony Stark. In seconds, he defeats the terrorists surrounding him, using his new weaponry to eliminate them without any casualties among the villagers. The gang leader tries to hide, but Tony captures him and throws him into the middle of the village, leaving him alive so that the villagers can take their revenge in a way that satisfies them. Afterward, Tony continues attacking the gang, but gets hit by one of their missiles and falls to the ground. He quickly recovers and retaliates with several missiles, destroying their tanks. He then goes on to destroy Stark Industries' missiles that Stain sold to the gang. After this destruction, he flies away just as Raza arrives and sees Tony flying. The American air base learns about what happened and wonders who attacked the terrorist group. They see a vehicle flying in the air and soldiers think it's a drone. Colonel James suspects it's one of Tony Stark's inventions and asks if they know anything about it. Tony denies knowing what they are talking about. Within seconds, 2 military jets start firing at him while he tries to evade their shots. Eventually, he has no choice but to surrender and talks to Colonel James, telling him that the flying vehicle is his and asks them to cease fire. James is angry that Tony is using unapproved equipment in the air. Tony has no choice but to tell him that he is in the vehicle. James doesn't have time to cancel the attack when one of the jets shoots at Tony's suit. He manages to collide with another jet's wing. The pilot ejects but gets stuck in his parachute. Tony intervenes by activating his own parachute and saves him. Tony convinces Colonel James that what happened with the jets was just training exercises. When he returns home, Pepper sees him in his new suit. Later, Stain visits the terrorist group and reveals that he initially paid them money to kidnap Tony and kill him. When Raza discovers that they captured genius Tony Stark, he decides to spare him, wanting to use him to create a missile. Raza tells Stain about their situation due to Tony Stark's actions. Stain responds by saying that if he had known how to capture him properly, things would be different for Raza now. Raza then shows Stain the Iron Man suit he collected from the desert and tells him it's a powerful weapon, even in its primitive form. Since you want to take over Stark Industries, our enemy is one. I will give you this suit as a gift in exchange for my men getting their own Iron Man suits. Stain approaches Raza and places a device next to his ear that disables Raza's brain function, allowing Stain's men to kill Raza and all his men while retrieving the Iron Man suit. Meanwhile, we return to Tony talking with Pepper. He asks her to go to Stark Industries' main computer and copy some specific information onto this flash drive so he can find out who the board is selling weapons to and stop them. He wants to save people who are affected by his actions. Having escaped from captivity made him realize he survived for a reason, to do something right. Pepper is moved by this change in Tony's character and agrees to help him. She goes to Stain's office computer and inserts the flash drive to copy data, but accidentally sees a video of the gang and realizes that Stain is responsible for her kidnapping of Tony. Just then, Stain enters and sees her at the computer. Pepper quickly hides what she was doing and leaves. However, when Stain sits down at his computer, he realizes she stole some information. As Pepper leaves, she runs into Agent Coulson and walks with him for safety while Stain meets with his engineers working on his Iron Man suit from the cave. The engineers manage to repair some damaged parts, but cannot create a reactor like Tony's. Stain gets angry and tells his engineer that Tony was able to create the reactor in a cave with primitive equipment. The engineer responds that he is not a genius like Tony Stark. Stain understands that he has no choice but to disable Tony using the same device he used on Raza. Tony finds himself unable to move, and Stain confesses that he ordered the gang to kill him. He says he wanted to eliminate Tony to take over the company because all the recent successes were due to him. However, it seems fate wanted Tony to live so that Stain could take his reactor. Stain indeed removes a reactor from Tony's chest, claiming it will change the world. He adds that he will also go kill Pepper, because she knows his secrets before leaving. Meanwhile, Pepper is calling Colonel James and informs him that Stain is responsible for Tony's kidnapping. James is on his way to Tony's house. At the same time, Tony struggles to breathe and drags himself toward the reactor Pepper gave him as a gift. He pulls himself along the ground, nearing death, when his robot hands him the reactor. He installs it back in his chest just as James arrives. James tells him he sent 5 of his men to capture Stain, but Tony knows that 5 people won't be able to stand against Stain's new power. Tony puts on his suit, and James is impressed by the new invention. He asks how he can help, and Tony tells him to clear the airspace of any aircraft. Meanwhile, Tony Stark, Pepper, Agent Coulson, and other national security agents arrive at Stain's headquarters and find the first Iron Man suit there. Suddenly, Stain appears wearing a massive suit powered by the reactor he stole from Tony. As Tony approaches them, Jarvis informs him that the reactor Stain is wearing provides half the power of the previous reactor because it is not designed for Mark suits. Just before Stain can kill Pepper, Tony arrives and a destructive battle begins between them. They move out into the street, where Stain lifts a car intending to throw it at Tony. Tony attacks and grabs the car to save innocent people, but Stain overpowers him and knocks him down. Tony struggles because his reactor is weak and running out of energy. As they fight, Stain starts experiencing issues with his suit due to freezing temperatures at high altitudes. Both suits begin malfunctioning, while Tony stands firm despite losing power. He eventually collapses as well, but manages to land safely on top of Stark Industries, using reserve energy. Stain survives but continues attacking Tony, who is now nearly out of energy. Stain captures Tony and begins destroying his suit piece by piece. However, in a miraculous escape, Tony manages to break free and contacts Pepper, asking her to activate Stark Industries' main reactor at full power. She does so, causing a massive energy surge that destroys part of the building while powering up Stain's suit. Pepper worries that Tony might not survive this time, but he escapes just in time while Stain loses consciousness and falls into Stark Industries' reactor, dying in the process. Meanwhile, Tony's reactor begins regaining energy, allowing him to survive. The next day, Colonel James holds a press conference discussing the battle that occurred on Stark Industries' roof. As Tony reads news articles about himself being dubbed Iron Man, he likes the name and decides to adopt it officially. Agent Coulson approaches Tony with a story for the press about Stain's death in a plane crash and suggests framing Iron Man as his personal bodyguard. Tony stands before the press, and he is supposed to tell the journalists the story that Agent Coulson shared with him. But at the last moment, he changes his mind and announces,
"I am Iron Man."
And that was the end of the movie. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and share to support us and help us reach more people. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll get all the new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Don't forget to share your thoughts in a comment below. Your feedback is really important to us and helps us improve our content. Thank you so much for your continuous support.